the silent night. The night air was thick with mystery, as if the darkness itself was guarding secrets too painful to speak. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves mingled with a crisp, cold breeze that slithered through the trees like whispered warnings. In that silent, shrouded hour, every step felt like an inevitable descent into a forgotten past, a past filled with lost hopes and fractured destinies. I walked slowly along the narrow, winding forest path, every movement measured and deliberate. My hand clutched tightly onto a worn crutch, the only support I had now. Despite the smooth facade I tried to portray, each faltering step reminded me of the life that once brimmed with promise, a life where strength and honor were not luxuries, but a destiny. Now, the echo of my limp seemed to reverberate through the silent trees, amplifying the weight of my solitude. As I ventured deeper into the woods, where the feeble glow of the moon barely penetrated the thick canopy, I felt an inexplicable pull toward a place that had become a sanctuary for my shattered soul. This was the realm where I had left my scattered remnants, a place where old wounds met silent confessions, and ink met memory. The cool stone of an ancient tree beckoned me closer, its rough bark etched with time and secrets. I paused, withdrawing a fragile, crinkled parchment from the depths of my pocket, and pressed it gently against the bark, as though seeking solace in its weathered surface. The paper, stained with the indelible mark of my past thoughts, pulsed under my fingertips like a living heartbeat. I could almost hear the soft murmur of the words, a secret language of pain and beauty woven into verses that I had penned in moments of quiet desperation. In that instant, I was not the alpha, the proud warrior heralded by my family, but merely a poet, an outcast whose words swirled in the darkness like smoke, both elusive and burning with unspoken passion. Under that vast, enigmatic night sky, every whisper of wind seemed to echo the memories of a time when I was whole. I remembered the days filled with laughter, the gentle caresses of warm sunlight, and the strong, reassuring voices of those who believed in me. My father, whose commanding presence once demanded respect the moment he entered a room, had instilled in me the promise of greatness. My mother, fierce yet tender, had wrapped me in comfort even in the stormiest nights. They had seen potential, in me, a future where I was to inherit the mantle of leadership, to be the beacon that guided our pack to glory. But that promise had been shattered like brittle glass one ill-fated night. In a blur of headlights and rushing winds, our joyful celebration turned into a nightmare. The memory of that night, of a sudden monstrous howl and a reckless dash into the unknown, still haunted every corner of my mind. I recalled the terror in my mother's eyes, the desperate command to run, and the split-second decision that had altered the course of my destiny. That night, beneath the ghostly glow of the moon, I had lost not only my parents, but also the assurance of becoming the alpha I was meant to be. Instead, I was left broken, a soul trapped in a body that no longer obeyed its will. Now, in the quiet isolation of these woods, the remnants of my past converged in a silent elegy. I stood there, under the indifferent gaze of the stars, burdened by memories too vivid to erase. The lingering pain in my leg, the phantom ache that resonated with every step, was a constant reminder of a fate I never chose. Yet, in that same moment of despair, there was a spark, an unexplainable yearning to redefine my existence through the art of word and verse. A desire to capture the raw essence of my struggle, to transmute the sorrow into something that might one day be understood. There was beauty in that desolation, a quiet kind of defiance. The forest, with its twisted roots and gnarled branches, seemed to mirror my inner turmoil, offering both torment and comfort in equal measure. Each subtle rustle of leaves, every distant echo of an unknown creature, deepened the mystery of the night and of myself. It was as if the world was urging me to confront my darkest fears, to embrace the pain and transform it into something luminous. In that mystical solitude, I found both refuge and challenge. The path before me was not just a route through the woods, but a journey inward, a journey to uncover the shattered fragments of a forgotten hero. The shadows that danced around me seemed to whisper possibilities, to remind me that even in utter isolation, there is a chance for renewal. In the embrace of the silent night, I vowed to sift through the ruins of my past, to reclaim the poetry that had once defined me, and perhaps to find a way to mend a broken heart. Each step carried me further from the world I once knew, and deeper into the labyrinth of my own soul. And though the pain was relentless, there was a strange solace in the struggle, a quiet promise that from the ashes of despair, something transcendent might yet emerge. As I continued along the path, the ancient trees bore silent witness to my internal battle, a testament to the enduring spirit of one who refused to be defined solely by tragedy. This night was not merely a passage of time. It was a crucible in which I would forge a new identity, a rebirth from the depths of desolation into a future written with passion, mystery, and hope. And somewhere among the tangled shadows and whispered echoes, a flicker of light began to break through the darkness, heralding the promise of redemption waiting patiently at the edge of despair. Leaving pieces behind, under the soft glow of a solitary lantern, I reached into the folds of my weathered coat and drew out a crinkled piece of parchment, its edges frayed by time and countless confessions. This paper was more than ink on fiber. It was an intimate record of the whispers of my soul, a token of the moments I had lost and those I hoped to reclaim. As I held it in my trembling hand, I marveled at its fragile beauty, a relic of the person I once was, and perhaps of the person I longed to become. I approached an ancient, sprawling oak, its bark rugged and pitted with the scars of countless seasons. With a reverence reserved for sacred rituals, I pressed the parchment against the cold, rough wood. Slowly, I smoothed it out, as if trying to erase the wrinkles of a hard-fought past with the simple, yet tender caress of my fingertips. The texture of the bark, coarse and time-worn, reminded me that every scar told a story, much like the ink that stained my pages. In that quiet moment, the tree became a silent guardian, a repository for my secrets, embracing them as though they were precious fragments of lost identity. The ink on the parchment was dark and deliberate, each letter a heartbeat pulsing with the fervor of my inner life. I could almost hear the rhythmic thud of my emotions as I traced the words with my fingertips, feeling the subtle vibrations of raw truth. The lines were not just written, they were etched with the yearning for understanding and the desperate desire to be seen, truly seen, for who I was underneath the heavy mask of expectation. In these words, I was not the traditional alpha feared on the battlefield or revered in the pack. Instead, I was a sensitive soul, a poet whose spirit beat with the cadence of whispered dreams and broken promises. Every stroke of the pen was both an act of defiance and a tender surrender to vulnerability. In that clandestine communion between ink and paper, I allowed myself to expose the cracks of my being. I was not defined by the brutal strength of muscle or the soaring triumphs on the hunt, but by a fragile, incandescent passion that could transform pain into poetry. The verses flowed from my heart like a delicate stream, each syllable carrying the weight of 1,000 silent laments, each word a testament to battles fought in the quiet corridors of my mind. I lingered there, as if reluctant to disturb the magical dance between my soul and the ancient oak. With each caress of the parchment, the hush of the forest seemed to pause and listen. The rustle of leaves provided a soft symphony, as if nature itself was revealing its secrets to the one who dared to unburden his soul. In the interplay of shadow and light, the tree bore witness to my internal struggle. A man who had once been molded for greatness, yet now yearned only for genuine connection, for the freedom to reveal the true contours of his inner self. There was something deeply intimate in the way the ink bled across the page, It did not merely chronicle a moment of despair or longing, but encapsulated the essence of who I was. A poet adrift in a world that demanded brute strength, where soft words were often drowned out by the roar of survival. In every loop and curl of the script, one could feel the conflict between the man who was expected to lead and the man who was forged in the quiet agony of unspoken truths. I was the one who penned secret verses under the veil of darkness, a silent rebel writing his own story against a fate that had once seemed unchangeable. As I slowly backed away from the oak tree, leaving behind the tangible embodiment of my inner world, a sense of calm and sorrow mingled in my chest. This was my ritual, a recurring act of liberation and mourning, a small private rebellion against the constraints of my predetermined destiny. The parchment, now resting against the rough bark, bore not only my confessions but also a promise. It was a promise that no matter how heavy the burden of my past, I would continue to write, to weave my broken dreams into verses that might one day illuminate the darkness. The hidden message within these lines was more than a secret or a confession. It was an invitation, an unspoken call to anyone who felt the sting of isolation, to those who had ever yearned to be understood despite their imperfections. And within that invitation lay the mystery of the man behind the words, a man not celebrated for his physical might, but for his quiet resilience, his capacity to feel deeply, and his unwavering commitment to preserving the beauty of his own truth. In that twilight moment, as the cool night embraced me and the whispers of ancient trees mingled with the pulse of my heart, I felt a bittersweet surge of hope. I knew that these clandestine verses, left behind like scattered pieces of my soul, carried the potential to unravel stories of love and redemption. They beckoned to those brave enough to search for meaning in the darkness, inviting them to find solace in the truth that sometimes the most powerful strength lies in the vulnerability of the human heart. And so, beneath the silent canopy of the midnight sky, I vowed to keep writing, to let each piece of fallen ink be a testament to the journey of a broken man who dared to dream, who dared to be different, and who, above all else, believed that even in solitude there was beauty, waiting to be discovered. A heritage of expectations, I can still remember, with a clarity that cuts through the present silence, a time when my future gleamed with promise, a future where I was destined to stand as the alpha, the heart and soul of our pack. In those golden days, my every step was a prelude to greatness, and I bore the weight of expectation with a head held high, even if I was too young to truly understand it all. My earliest memories are steeped in the warmth of family, a vivid tapestry, woven from the commanding presence of my father and the fierce yet tender care of my mother. My father, a living embodiment of authority and strength, would walk into any room with a quiet command that silenced even the most boisterous voices. His mere presence was enough to demand respect from those around him, an aura of power that I, in my childish awe, eagerly sought to emulate. I recalled watching him from the small corner of our modest living space as he planned and strategized for the pack, his eyes glinting with determination and a hint of unyielding compassion. It was in those moments that I felt a stirring inside, a belief that one day I too would carry that torch of leadership. Yet alongside the strength of my father, there shone a gentler light in the form of my mother. She possessed an uncanny ability to be both formidable and loving, a duality that mystified me as a child. I remember her voice, soft yet resolute, as she would tuck me into bed each night, running her fingers tenderly through my hair. "You are strong, my love," she whispered, her words a lullaby that promised a future filled with triumphs and boundless possibilities. Every bedtime story and each whispered promise became a cherished relic in my heart, an echo of the dreams she nurtured within me. Her care was as fierce as it was gentle, a constant reminder that while the world might be harsh, love remained a potent, healing force. Those evenings, filled with her tender reassurances, painted a picture of a destiny unmarred by the hardships that lay ahead, I would close my eyes and imagine a future where I assumed my rightful place among the revered leaders, a beacon of strength who would guide our pack through adversity with unwavering resolve. The dreams were so vivid, they felt tangible, like I could almost grasp them, hold them close, and breathe in the promise of legacy they carried. It was a life where honor, respect, and the right to lead were not just inherited but earned through a dedication to the ideals my parents had so lovingly instilled in me. But somewhere along this path, this legacy of greatness was lost to the merciless reality of fate. The memory of that bright, promised future now contrasts painfully with the broken man I see in the mirror. The strength I once felt coursing through my veins has ebbed away, replaced by an aching fragility. The echoes of my father's commanding laughter and my mother's soothing whispers have faded into distant murmurs, leaving behind a void filled with regret and unfulfilled potential. I feel the haunting weight of expectations that I could never live up to, a burden that has, over time, chipped away at the very foundation of who I was meant to be. In the quiet moments, I often find myself haunted by the spirit of the boy I used to be, a bright-eyed dreamer with a heart full of hope. I remember how others looked at me then, their eyes alight with anticipation, believing that I would someday rise as a leader worthy of the Alpha legacy. I recall the pride in my parents' eyes, the unspoken communication that spoke of a future where I would command respect and bring honor to our family name. Those memories, though warm and comforting, now serve as a stark reminder of the gulf between who I was destined to be and who I have become. In the solitude of these dark, echoing nights, the vivid recollections of my past life, where every word, every action was imbued with purpose and strength, cut deeper than any physical wound. It is as though the very essence of my being is torn between two worlds, the one of endless possibilities that my heritage promised, and the current reality of shattered expectations and a broken spirit. The crisp sound of my crutch against the forest floor is a constant metronome of loss, marking the relentless passage of time and the erosion of a future that was so tenderly envisioned by those who loved me most. Yet, even in this profound state of desolation, there lingers a spark, a bittersweet trace of hope hidden in the recesses of my heart. Those youthful moments of promise were not merely illusions. They were the foundation upon which my soul was built. And while the weight of my current existence feels insurmountable, the memory of my father's proud gaze and my mother's gentle affirmations still whisper of strength untapped and potential unfulfilled. They remind me that deep within, there remains a fragment of that once brilliant future, the resilient core of a leader waiting to be rediscovered. This legacy of expectation, forged in the fires of love and steeped in the honor of my heritage, serves as both a benediction and a curse. It is a constant reminder of all that I once aspired to be, and all that I fear I may never reclaim. And as I journey through these silent, shadowed nights, I am left with a poignant, lingering question. Can I ever mend the fractured promise of my past and rise again as the man I was meant to be? The answer remains as elusive as the passing wind, leaving me to wander these lonely paths with nothing but the lingering echoes of promises and the weight of an unfulfilled destiny. The fateful ride. It began as a night filled with innocent joy, a celebration of another year, a birthday glowing with the promise of tomorrow. I remember the taste of roasted meat and the sweet tang of honey cakes, the delightful chorus of laughter echoing from our car as we journeyed home. The world outside seemed bathed in a gentle, celebratory light, and for a fleeting moment, the future looked unblemished and full of hope. But in the blink of an eye, that fragile joy turned into a nightmare that would forever redefine my existence. We were driving down a quiet country road when the first sign of chaos appeared. The headlights suddenly illuminated something massive and unnatural, an enormous silhouette that did not belong to any creature I had ever seen before. Its form was shifting and indistinct, a grotesque apparition in the beam of our car's lights. I could see its fur, dark and matted with something that reeked of decay, and its eyes, glowing with a menacing red that sliced through the darkness with eerie precision. The car jolted violently, tires screeching against the pavement as my father cursed under his breath. The vehicle swerved uncontrollably, the sound of shattering glass mingling with the frantic thud of our hearts. In the midst of this terrifying chaos, I caught a glimpse of my father. His stern, proud features were now contorted in grim determination as he fought against the unseen force. But in that desperate moment, something began to change within him. Without warning, the transformation overtook him. My father, once the formidable leader of our pack, began to morph before my very eyes. His muscles rippled and reshaped into something primal and wild, his limbs extending into twisted, clawed appendages that glistened under the erratic light. The man I had known, respected, commanding, and protective, was being replaced by a creature of myth and horror. A werewolf, fierce yet tormented. The transformation was violent and merciless. I remember the sickening sound of bones breaking, the monstrous growl that erupted from deep within him, a sound that struck terror into my very core. As the creature that he was becoming lunged forward, my mother's face, warm and radiant just moments before, turned into a mask of raw terror. The memory of her screams is etched into my mind. The piercing cry as she tried to shield me, then the sound of crushing, savage bites. In a cruel twist of fate, she was taken from us in that single, horrifying instant. The car spun wildly, its metal frame groaning under the onslaught of shattered glass and fragmented dreams. I felt my body jerk violently forward, secured only by the seatbelt that dug uncomfortably into my skin. The world around me fractured into disjointed scenes of chaos, flashes of blood, splintered glass, and a cacophony of guttural howls that overpowered every rational thought. In the midst of this maelstrom, I could do nothing but sit frozen. Every instinct screamed at me to escape, to run, to fight back against the horror that now dominated our lives. But I was paralyzed by a force more insidious than the fear that gripped me, as the blood flowed freely and the sound of my mother's final cries faded. An overwhelming, searing pain ignited in my leg. It was as if my very flesh had betrayed me, reminding me that I was no longer the child who once believed in the infinite power of hope and love. The transformation, the destruction, and the loss collided in a terrifying instant, shattering the delicate illusions of my childhood and casting me into a realm of broken promises. The figure of my father, now a ferocious beast incarnate, had once been the paragon of strength I was meant to emulate. Instead, in that fateful ride, I witnessed the collapse of everything I thought was certain. The vivacity of life had been traded for a dark, relentless nightmare, and with it, the expectation of a bright future was snuffed out like a feeble candle flame. In the aftermath, the world grew unbearably silent, a silence that screamed with memories of pain and regret. Emergency responders arrived too late to undo the horror that had unfolded. I was left among the wreckage of a life that would never be the same. The blood, the shattered remnants of glass, and the overwhelming stench of terror remained as permanent imprints upon my soul. They were constant reminders of that night, replaying in my mind's eye with every faltering heartbeat. That car ride, meant to be a simple journey home after a birthday celebration, irreversibly altered my destiny. It stripped away the comforting layers of childhood innocence and replaced them with a harsh reality marked by violence and loss. The transformation of my father, once a proud symbol of strength and unity, into a creature of raw, uncontrolled ferocity, shook the very foundation upon which I had built my identity. Now, as I stand before the shadows of my past, I realize that the fateful ride was not merely an accident. It was a turning point, a brutal rebirth into a world where the light of hope struggles to penetrate the overwhelming darkness. In that moment of horror, I inherited a legacy of pain, a heritage etched in blood and sorrow. And though I carry The scars of that night, they now serve as a somber reminder of the life that was lost and the future I must navigate. A future where the boundaries between man and monster, strength and vulnerability, are forever blurred. Surviving the unthinkable. In the harrowing aftermath of that fateful ride, darkness pressed in on me from every side. The world had shattered into a blur of horror and pain, and as the echoes of shattered glass and anguished cries faded, a new, terrible silence took over. A silence filled with the lingering stench of blood and the bitter taste of loss. I sat in the wreckage, my mind clouded by shock, trying desperately to piece together the shards of a life that had just been ripped apart. In that moment, everything familiar vanished, leaving behind only the raw agony of a nightmare turned reality. The most searing of all was the final sound of my mother's scream, a cry so filled with terror and sorrow that it seared into my memory like an everlasting scar. I had watched, powerless, as the rogue's savage teeth found their mark. My mother's warm, nurturing presence, which had once been a beacon of safety, was extinguished in an instant. Her body crumpled, and I could do nothing to halt the cascade of tragedy. Amidst the chaos, a deep, unbearable wound tore through my leg, a constant, searing reminder that I was now bound to a fate defined by pain and regret. The shock of the wound mingled with the crushing grief, leaving me feeling utterly broken, as if every hope for a future was being stolen from me at that very moment. And yet, as if in the midst of utter despair, a spark of unexpected light broke through the darkness. Little Evelyn, barely 5 years old, stepped forward in a display of silent bravery that cut through the clamor of horror. With eyes too wise for her tender age, and hands steady despite the terror that gripped the moment, she moved toward me. Without uttering a single word, she knelt by my side and, with a determination that belied her small frame, reached out to gently wipe away the blood that ran unchecked across my face. In that quiet, wordless gesture, she became an emblem of resilience, a small, determined flame of hope flickering within the oppressive gloom. I could see in her eyes no trace of fear or pity, only a firm, unspoken resolve that I was not alone. She seemed to sense the depths of my shattered spirit, and against all instinct, offered the comfort of her innocent touch. That brief moment of connection was a lifeline, an assurance that even in the midst of such devastation, the will to survive could still take root. It was as if she was silently promising that we both would endure, that despite everything, there remained a reason to cling to life, even when it felt like all had been lost. Before long, the quiet echo of despair was pierced by the distant but growing roar of the pack. Like a tide that rushes in after a storm, our rescue came not as a single, comforting hand, but as a throng of determined faces emerging from the shadows. The elders and warriors of our pack arrived, their expressions somber, carved with a deep sadness that resonated with my internal pain. Their presence marked the return to a semblance of order, a necessary, though bittersweet reminder that the world continued even after such profound tragedy. They gathered around with hushed voices and careful, deliberate motions, their efforts to salvage what was left of that dreadful night almost ceremonial. I remember the soft murmur of their concern, the gentle, almost reverent handling as they pulled me from the wreckage and tried to shield me from the lingering horror. Their touch, though firm and guiding, could not erase the overwhelming feeling of being broken and unwanted that had already taken root within me. I felt like a discarded remnant, a future alpha who, in one catastrophic moment, had been reduced to nothing more than a wounded child lost in a cruel world. Yet, even as the pack worked to restore a semblance of order, the contrast between my own despair and little Evelyn's quiet determination could not be more stark. Where I felt defeated, drenched in the hopelessness of a future marred by permanent loss, she seemed to radiate an unyielding spirit. Her small hands, so steady and sure, continued to clean away the literal and metaphorical remnants of tragedy. With every act of care, she whispered a silent message of survival, a pledge that amidst the wreckage of broken dreams, there might yet be something beautiful and enduring. In the murk of that night, under the indifferent gaze of the moon, struggled to find a foothold in the ruins of my identity. The traumatic images were seared into my mind: shattered glass, the metallic tang of blood, and the unbearable weight of loss. And yet, the presence of that tiny, resolute figure offered a fragile hint of redemption. I began to understand that survival was not merely about enduring the physical pain, but also about nurturing those sparks of hope that could, in time, mend even the most fractured of souls. That night, as we were gently carried away into the embrace of the fortress, I felt the silent promise that every dark moment carries within it the seed of renewal. Little Evelyn's determination was a beacon amidst the chaos, a reminder that in the aftermath of unthinkable horror, the human spirit can still forge a path toward light. Though I was left with scars that would never fade, the tender, unwavering strength of that innocent child became a small, vital ember in the vast darkness, a promise that perhaps, in time, I could find my way back to myself, to the man I was meant to be. A path to the fortress. In the lingering aftermath of that violent, shattering night, the forest remained an eerie witness to my broken heart. The darkness was no longer absolute, but softened by the weak glow of scattered starlight and the gentle twinkle of distant lanterns. With each heavy step, I began the hesitant journey toward the fortress, a sanctuary whose storied stone walls promised both protection and a kind of healing, even if the pain of the past clung stubbornly to my every thought. The path was barely lit, a narrow corridor bordered by ancient trees whose gnarled branches reached out like protective arms. The crunch of leaves underfoot provided a slow, rhythmic counterpoint to the turbulent cadence of my own heart. I couldn't help but notice the way the moonlight filtered in through the canopy, illuminating patches of the forest floor in a soft, ghostly silver. Every step toward the fortress felt like a gradual emerging from the depths of sorrow, a careful, reluctant ascent toward a faint glimmer of hope. As I trudged onward, the imposing silhouette of the fortress began to materialize on the horizon. Its massive stone walls, darkened by the passage of time yet imbued with a surprising warmth, towered above me like a bastion of age-old wisdom. Each stone seemed to hold countless stories and secrets, stories of survival, love, and sacrifice that had been etched into its surface by the hands of time. The contrast was palpable, the cold, raw grief I carried within, and the comforting embrace of these ancient stones that had witnessed generations of lives, triumphs, and heartaches. The further I advanced, the more vivid the details of the fortress became. Scattered lanterns hung from rugged turrets and arched passageways, their flickering flames casting playful shadows on the worn cobblestones. The gentle, rhythmic glow of the lantern light wove patterns on the walls, creating a tapestry of light and shadow that recalled the delicate beauty of forgotten days. There was an unexpected, almost nostalgic fragrance in the air, a blend of firewood smoldering in old hearths and the musky aroma of aged books, reminiscent of a library filled with centuries of accumulated wisdom. These scents stirred in me, a mixture of comfort and melancholy, a reminder that even in the midst of despair, there exists a repository of history and hope. In that moment, as I paused at the threshold of this formidable yet welcoming edifice, a small hand reached out in gentle reassurance. It was little Evelyn, her eyes reflecting the light of the lanterns, her presence a steady beacon in the overwhelming night. Without a word, she squeezed my hand, and in her quiet, earnest whisper I heard a promise. "You are safe. Come with me." That whispered reassurance acted as a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of my own despair. Her simple words, though barely audible above the rustle of the wind, resonated deeply within me, igniting a fragile ember of hope that perhaps the fortress could serve not only as a refuge but as a place of restoration. Hand in hand, we continued our careful walk toward the imposing gate. The closer we got, the more I felt the fortress's subtle embrace, a sense of belonging that slowly began to dissolve the remnants of isolation I had carried since that fateful night. The journey was not marked by grand gestures or triumphant strides, but by quiet moments of shared vulnerability and understanding. Each step was a silent acknowledgement that while the scars of the past might never fully fade, they could, in time, be soothed by the gentle, enduring presence of a sanctuary built on the foundations of resilience. As we reached the main entrance, the heavy wooden doors loomed before us. They were broad and sturdy, adorned with intricate carvings that spoke of a long lineage of protectors and healers. The doors creaked open slowly at our touch, revealing a vast courtyard bathed in a warm, golden light that contrasted sharply with the cold darkness outside. In that luminous space, the air itself seemed to carry a note of healing, a quiet hum that promised that here, at least for a time, one could find respite from the relentless storms of life. Inside, the fortress was a blend of solemn history and gentle comfort. Long hallways lined with flickering torches led to rooms filled with soft furnishings and the subtle aroma of herbs and aged paper, a testament to the lives that had once unfolded within these walls. Every corner bore silent witness to moments of both sorrow and joy, a living archive of human endurance and transformation. Even as the echoes of loss still haunted me, I could sense that here, amid the collective memory of the past, there might be space to rebuild and redefine who I was. Evelyn's soft hand still gripped mine as we passed through the open door. Her eyes, clear and unburdened by cynicism, mirrored a belief in a future that had not been completely erased by tragedy. With each delicate step, the fortress offered a subtle assurance that in this hallowed space, the broken could find healing, and the despairing could rediscover hope. It was a place where the weight of yesterday's sorrows might be lessened by the quiet promise of tomorrow. In that moment, I felt a tender stirring inside, a small, persistent light fighting back against the enveloping darkness. The fortress, with its enduring walls and the soft glow of lanterns, began to feel less like a distant, imposing relic, and more like a sanctuary, a home where perhaps one day I could reclaim the strength that had been so cruelly wrenched away. And as I stood there, hand in hand with little Evelyn, I allowed myself to believe, even if only for a fleeting heartbeat, that perhaps this was the beginning of a long, slow journey toward mending the fractured pieces of a life shattered by loss. A new friend emerges. It happened on a day when the fortress, already a refuge from the darkness of my past, seemed to shimmer with the promise of new beginnings. I was navigating the hushed corridors of its ancient halls when I first encountered him, a striking figure leaning casually against the grand staircase. His presence was magnetic, drawing my gaze with an intensity that was both curious and unsettling. His eyes, dark and vibrant with an unspoken challenge, met mine as if searching for something hidden beneath my weary facade. Leon stood apart from the others in the dimly lit hall, his confidence evident in the effortless way he carried himself. There was a natural grace in his posture, as though every movement was a carefully choreographed dance. It was not only his physical presence that impressed me, but also the aura of mystery that clung to him like a second skin. His gaze flickered, almost playfully, before settling into one of deep, penetrating curiosity, a look that seemed to pierce the veneer of my fractured self and hint at an understanding far beyond words. Before I could fully process the moment, Evelyn appeared from around the corner, as if summoned by fate itself. With a gentle smile and a protective air in her eyes, she stepped between Leon and me, introducing him with an almost maternal warmth. "This is Leon," she said, her voice soft yet laden with gravity. "He's someone special, someone who's been a friend to us all." Her tone conveyed both reassurance and a subtle warning, a delicate acknowledgement that while Leon might offer comfort and strength, his arrival also heralded shifts in our already tumultuous world. Leon's smile was brief but sincere, and in That moment it hinted at a deeper well of sincerity just beneath his cool exterior. It was the kind of smile that held both charm and a trace of mischief, leaving a lingering question of who he really was beneath the confident facade. I felt a tightening in my chest as I observed him, an unsettling mix of admiration and an inexplicable conflict. It was as if his presence stirred dormant memories of the alpha I was once supposed to be, a role I could no longer claim, not after everything that had been lost. While Evelyn's warm introduction was filled with genuine care, it inadvertently underscored my own profound sense of inadequacy. Here was someone who seemed to embody all the qualities that I once believed defined the very essence of strength: the boldness, the unyielding confidence, and an almost effortless allure. And yet, as much as his presence was promising, it served as a stark reminder of the chasm between who I had been expected to become and the shattered, haunted man I was now. His every confident stride along the stone floor seemed to echo with a promise of unbridled potential, a promise that I feared I might never live up to. The encounter with Leon was not a collision of rivals, at least not immediately. It was more akin to the gentle intermingling of two distinct energies, one rooted in the remnants of an old legacy, the other bursting with a vibrant, unpredictable force that dared to challenge the status quo. Over the next few days, I found myself observing him in quiet moments. He was always nearby, his presence subtle yet undeniable, as he moved through the fortress with an air of natural command that belied any pretense. He seemed to occupy a space where strength and tenderness coexisted, a duality that resonated deeply with both Evelyn and, unexpectedly, with me. I would catch fleeting glances of him interacting with others, a patient word here, a supportive smile there. And yet there was an undercurrent in his demeanor, a silent acknowledgement that his calm exterior might conceal moments of vulnerability or even inner conflict of his own. This too stirred something within me. I recognized that behind his seemingly effortless confidence, there might lie hidden scars, stories of battles fought in silence, just as mine were. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible kinship that began to form between us, a connection built not on words, but on the mutual understanding of loss and the quiet determination to survive against all odds. Even as Evelyn's gentle introduction paved the way for our tentative acquaintance, I wrestled internally with the complicated emotions that his presence evoked. Here was a reminder of what I might have been, a future alpha, revered and unburdened by the fragility that now marked my every step. I felt an unexpected twinge of jealousy, not born of petty rivalry, but from the sorrow of recognizing that the person I once dreamed I could become was slipping further away with each passing day. At the same time, his existence stirred a flicker of hope, a possibility that perhaps, even in the midst of my brokenness, there might be space to reclaim some semblance of strength, if only I could learn from his example. Leon's arrival was, in many ways, the quiet catalyst for change, a gentle upheaval that nudged the foundation of old relationships and promised new dynamics, even as it foreshadowed the inevitable tensions that such shifts entail. His friendship began as a subtle thread woven into the tapestry of our lives, one that hinted at future complexities and unspoken competitive undercurrents that neither I nor Leon could ignore. Yet for that fleeting moment on the grand staircase, there was only the unspoken warmth of human connection, a spark of possibility emerging from the interplay of fate, loss, and the resilient promise of hope. In that crowded hall, amidst the enduring echoes of our shared past and the cautious hope of tomorrow, I realized that sometimes a new friend is not just an addition to your life, but a mirror reflecting both what you have lost and what you might still become. And as I watched Leon's enigmatic smile and felt Evelyn's reassuring touch, I couldn't help but wonder what new truths might unfold as these fragile threads of friendship and unspoken desire began to intertwine. Rituals of training and banter. At the break of dawn, as a pale light filtered through the high-arched windows of the fortress training ground, a chorus of clashing steel and spirited laughter filled the air, a sound that was as much a part, of our everyday existence as the rising sun. This was our ritual, a daily dance between discipline and levity, where the warriors of our pack honed not only their bodies, but the unspoken bonds that held us together. I started my day slowly, each step measured and cautious, a reminder of the physical limitations that now marked my existence. My crutch tapped a steady rhythm along the stone floor, a stark counterpoint to the high-energy chaos that surrounded me. Yet, amidst the intensity of training, there was an undeniable atmosphere of playfulness, a careful balance between fierce determination and light-hearted banter. I was near the grand staircase, where the training ground converged into an open courtyard flanked by ancient stone columns that had witnessed countless victories and defeats. There, Leon's presence was impossible to ignore. He moved with a bold recklessness that made each of his actions seem almost theatrical, a stark contrast to my own measured approach. His every flourish, from the dramatic swing of a wooden sword to his carefree leaps during combat drills, carried an air of unbridled confidence that left me both in awe and, admittedly, slightly envious. "Hey, Chris," Leon called out with a mischievous glint in his eyes, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I hope your leg isn't planning to retire today." His teasing tone was warm, cutting through the tension like a burst of sunlight on a cloudy day. I couldn't help but chuckle, despite the ever-present reminder of my vulnerability. Even as I struggled to keep up, his banter reminded me that strength wasn't measured solely in physical prowess. It was in the heart and the spirit. The session unfolded in a series of drills designed to test both speed and endurance. While the other warriors exchanged powerful blows and agile dodges, I found solace in the steady rhythm of my own actions, each move a deliberate effort to reclaim some measure of confidence. Leon, ever the natural showman, took every opportunity to engage me in a playful rivalry. During one sparring match, he circled me with a carefree swagger, his eyes twinkling with challenge. "You've been overly cautious lately, my friend," he teased, his tone light, but his underlying message clear. "Sometimes you have to throw caution to the wind if you want to win the fight." His words, though wrapped in humor, stung a little, a reminder of the past where I was expected to be bold and formidable. Yet, they also sparked an inner fire that urged me to push back against the constraints that had been forced upon me. In between drills, moments of teasing banter evolved into brief, intense exchanges that hinted at deeper emotional undercurrents. Leon's reckless confidence was both a mirror and a foil to my own situation. Where he was free and fearless, I was haunted by the memories of a lost potential. But even as our rivalry simmered beneath the surface, there was a mutual respect, a camaraderie forged in the crucible of shared struggles and unspoken truths. His witty remarks and daring maneuvers often made the others laugh. But to me, they were a bittersweet reminder of a strength I once possessed and longed to reclaim. During one session, as we paused for a brief respite under the watchful gaze of the fortress's stone guardians, Leon leaned against a pillar and smirked at my measured pace. "You know, Chris," he said, his tone half serious, "being cautious can be an asset. But if you keep moving at that snail's pace, I might just have to race you out of here." The light-hearted challenge sparked a moment of tension that was quickly diffused by a shared chuckle from everyone around. Yet, it also set the stage for an unspoken rivalry that promised to become more complex as the days passed. The training ground, with its sprawling open space and rugged charm, was a microcosm of our world, a place where individual strengths and weaknesses played out in real time, and where friendships were built as much on laughter and teasing as on the sweat and effort of battle. As I wiped a bead of sweat from my brow, I couldn't help but notice how these sessions slowly chipped away at the wall of isolation I had built around myself. The playful rivalry with Leon, the encouraging jibes, and the warm camaraderie of the pack all worked together to remind me that even in my broken state, I still had a place here. These moments, though superficially lighthearted, carried a weight of expectation and possibility. Every swing, every dodge, every banter-laced challenge was a small step in a larger, unspoken battle. A battle to redefine myself, not as the man I had been forced to become, but as the potential future leader I once dreamed of being. And as I matched Leon's teasing with my own measured retorts, I sensed that our rivalry was not merely about physical strength. It was a dance of spirits, a contest of wills that could ultimately lead either to mutual growth or to a deeper chasm between us. In the ebb and flow of training, amidst the clashing of wooden swords and the echo of laughter, a fragile new narrative began to emerge. It was a narrative that held the promise of transformation, a subtle foreshadowing of changes yet to come, both in the training ground and in the hearts of those who dwelled within the ancient walls of the fortress. And even as I navigated the challenges of my own limitations, the playful contest with Leon served as a gentle reminder that every setback carried with it a spark of opportunity, a chance to rise, learn, and ultimately, perhaps, to reclaim a piece of the strength I once believed was lost forever. An underlying spark. In the gentle ebb and flow of our daily routines at the fortress, there emerged a quiet intimacy between Evelyn and me, a delicate undercurrent of emotion that neither of us could fully articulate. It began in those shared moments of silence, in the lingering glances that passed between us, when words would have only muddled what our eyes and hearts sought to express. Evelyn's presence, subtle yet undeniable, brought a warmth that penetrated even the chill of my lingering grief and self-doubt. Often, as I moved through the corridors of the fortress, our eyes would meet in passing. In those split seconds, her smile, a faint, almost wistful curve of her lips, spoke volumes without a single word uttered. It was as if every gentle glance carried the unspoken promise of understanding, of connection that transcended the superficialities of our broken pasts. The soft glow of lantern light would catch the twinkle in her eyes, amplifying that silent communication that was both reassuring and quietly provocative. It stirred something deep within me, an echo of a hope I had long thought lost, yet now, tentatively awakening amid the encroaching shadows of my memory. I found myself grappling internally with conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was the profound pain of loss that had eroded the man I once was, leaving behind a shell of vulnerability and regret. On the other, there was a burgeoning desire, gentle yet insistent, that whispered of the possibility to love and be loved once more. Evelyn was a striking contrast to the harsh realities that had defined my recent days. Where I saw scars and remnants of shattered dreams, she saw strength and gentle beauty, allowing her subtle smiles and lingering looks to cut through the lingering remnants of my despair. Each encounter with her was a silent soliloquy, a momentary reprieve where the surrounding chaos faded into the background, leaving only the quiet hum of our shared vulnerability. In the soft, intimate space between us, my thoughts would race and falter. I questioned whether the spark I felt was merely a fragile ember or the promise of a flame that could one day ignite into something real, something worth fighting for. I wondered if she, too, sensed the delicate dance of emotions that passed silently between our glances, a mix of longing, hesitance, and an unspoken understanding of the deep battles waged within. Some afternoons, we would find ourselves side by side in the less crowded halls of the fortress, where the quiet allowed for reflection. There were times when she would steal a glance at me, a look so warm and penetrating that it seemed to momentarily erase the weight of my insecurities. Those brief exchanges were enough to stir a maelstrom of emotions inside me. I recalled moments when, as I struggled with self-doubt, feeling unworthy of the gentle light in her eyes, I would catch her gaze, soft and patient, silently urging me to believe that perhaps I was more than the sum of my broken pieces. It was, in these subtle interactions, that an undercurrent of desire began to weave through our daily lives. I often felt a stirring in my chest when she brushed past me, a fleeting sensation that was both comforting and agonizing. Her laughter, light and unburdened in those rare moments of shared humor, resonated within me long after the sound had faded. And yet, for all its promise, this growing connection was fraught with uncertainty. I questioned if my own inner turmoil and the scars of my past would forever render me unworthy of what she symbolized, a beacon of resilience and hope. In the quiet corners of the fortress, away from prying eyes, I would often retreat into thoughts of what might be if I could somehow dare to embrace these fragile feelings. What if I allowed myself to believe that, despite all my shortcomings, I could still be the man who deserved love and tenderness? What if Evelyn saw beyond the broken alpha, a figure diminished by fate and haunted by painful memories, and recognized the part of me that still dreamed of renewal? At times, these thoughts clashed violently with the harsh reality of my self-imposed isolation. I had long believed that my identity was irrevocably tied to my failures, that my physical and emotional scars would forever stand as barriers between me and the possibility of intimacy. And yet, every time our eyes met, every time her hand lingered on mine just a fraction longer, a whisper of possibility stirred within me, a promise that perhaps the quiet strength of the human heart could defy even the deepest despair. Our growing connection, subtle as it was, began to shape the very texture of my days. There was a rising curiosity, a sense of wonder about how these delicate emotions might steer our future encounters. The possibility of something genuine, something tender, gently beckoned from amidst the ruins of my past. Even as I fought to keep my guarded heart safe from further hurt, I couldn't help but be drawn to the promise that Evelyn, with her soft smiles and lingering glances, offered, a chance to find solace and perhaps even redemption in her presence. In moments at the silent spaces between our interactions, I would often replay our unspoken exchanges in my mind. They became a tapestry of fleeting yet profound moments, a private language that only we shared. And with each recollection, the possibility of a future where the broken parts of me could one day be mended grew a little brighter, a little more tangible. But even as hope ignited within me, I remained wary of the vulnerability it demanded. The internal battle raged on, between the desire to trust in this emerging spark and the relentless fear of falling once more into the abyss of unfulfilled longing. It was a precarious dance, balancing on the edge of vulnerability and guarded strength. I knew that any step taken in trust could lead to either a blossoming of love or the opening of old wounds. Yet amid the uncertainty and quiet turmoil, one thing became undeniably clear. Within the soft interplay of our gazes, in the silent promises exchanged without words, there lay the birth of something beautiful, a spark of connection that could, if nurtured with care, defy the bitter weight of our pasts and illuminate a path to a future filled with genuine warmth and understanding. Secret verses on parchment, beneath the sprawling canopy of a familiar oak tree, in a secluded glen where the world seemed to fall away into a quiet eternity, I found solace in solitude and the whispered secrets of my own heart. The oak, its gnarled branches etched with the stories of countless seasons, became my confidant, a silent witness to the delicate art of pouring my soul onto aged parchment. Here, amid the rustling leaves and the gentle murmur of a nearby brook, I created intimate poems, verses that bled with longing, beauty, and the hidden passion I dared not speak aloud. Every stroke of the pen was an act of confession, each word a fragile thread connecting me to the elusive hope that perhaps one day Evelyn would see beyond my scars. In the stillness of that sacred clearing, the ink flowed freely, unburdened by the fear of judgment or the weight of expectation. I allowed myself to write as if I were conversing with the universe, my verses imbued with metaphors that transformed my heartache into a language only the soul could understand. The verses took shape in a manner both raw and refined, a bittersweet symphony of emotions that danced between despair and desire. I compared my yearning for Evelyn to the gentle pull of the tide, an unstoppable force that reshaped the shore with every breath. Her presence, elusive yet ever-present, was painted in hues of moonlit silver and the delicate blush of dawn. I wrote of her eyes as twin beacons of hope, ones that could illuminate even the darkest corners of my troubled existence. Every word became a testament to a love that lingered in the quiet spaces between us, a secret passion too fragile to proclaim aloud. But as I penned these secret verses, there was an unyielding irony that gnawed at me. I stood hidden from the world's view, a ghost weaving my heart's desire into words, all the while remaining unseen and unacknowledged. The very act of exposing my innermost self was both liberating and deeply isolating, a silent rebellion against the persona I was forced to wear. Each line was a step toward truth, yet it also served as a reminder of the distance between the man I dreamed of becoming and the broken figure who silently toiled under the weight of expectation. My verses were rich with imagery, a tapestry of metaphor and emotion that sought to capture the paradox of my existence. I wrote of leaves falling gently from the ancient branches, each one a fleeting moment of beauty that, like our lives, was destined to be forgotten. I likened my unspoken love to a hidden bloom that only revealed itself in the quiet solitude of the night, its petals fragile and ephemeral, yet bursting with a vivid, untamed passion. At times, the words took on a life of their own, whispering of a secret truth too profound to be contained by mere language, a truth that hinted at the very essence of who I was, a poet marred by pain, yet yearning for a love that could light even the darkest corridors of my soul. As I continued to write, a sense of suspense began to build, a quiet, persistent undercurrent that urged me to read the verses over and over, each time uncovering layers of meaning that I had not noticed before. The parchment, softened by the gentle caresses of time and the cool night breeze, bore the marks of my struggle, a record of dreams and despair intermingled in ink. There were hints in each line, secrets woven so delicately that they beckoned to be noticed by those who knew how to listen to the language of the heart. It was as if every word was a hidden clue to the man behind the mask, a subtle invitation for someone to decipher the depths of my unspoken emotions. But fear, ever the silent adversary, kept my verses confined to the solitude of that beloved oak. I dared not let these words see the light of day for fear that exposing them would unravel the fragile tapestry of hope I was struggling to mend. Instead, I tucked them away in a quiet crevice of the oak's rugged trunk, a secret shrine to my inner life, safe from prying eyes yet eternally linked to my soul. In that hidden alcove, my poetry lay dormant for days, a collection of silent promises waiting for the right moment to be understood. There, in the stillness of nature, under the unwavering watch of the ancient oak, my secret verses became my confidant, an enduring echo of the love I dared not claim, and the inner fire that still refused to be extinguished. Though unseen and unacknowledged by the world, every carefully crafted word was a declaration of the man I longed to become, and every metaphor a prayer for redemption from the darkness that had, for so long, defined me. As the nights grew quieter and the seasons shifted, the suspense of that hidden truth began to seep into my thoughts. I wondered if someday, perhaps, someone might discover these whispered confessions and understand the true measure of the passion and pain that dwelled within me. Until then, I remained the silent poet beneath the oak, an unseen guardian of secret verses that held within them the promise of a love as profound as it was forbidden, deepening bonds and silent promises. In the hushed corridors of the fortress, where twilight mingled with the soft hum of ancient memories, Evelyn and I found moments of quiet intimacy that seemed to suspend time itself. It was in the shared glances during our solitary walks along time-worn stone passages, where our eyes would meet and linger just long enough to say all that words could not. In those fleeting instances, her gaze, gentle yet piercing, conveyed a depth of understanding that made the weight of the past seem momentarily lighter. I could feel the near-tangible connection between us, as if every silent exchange wove an unspoken promise of solace amid the turmoil of our lives. On one particularly cool evening, as the scent of pine and aged parchment filled the air, we found ourselves side by side on a narrow balcony overlooking the fortress courtyard. The low murmur of distant voices and the soft flicker of lantern light provided a backdrop to a conversation that needed no words. Instead of speaking, we communicated through subtle touches. A delicate brush of fingers as she offered her hand for support. A gentle pat on my forearm, as if to assure me that I was not alone. In that shared silence, I recalled every past experience that had etched my understanding of love and loyalty into my soul. The memory of my mother's comforting whisper, the fierce yet tender way my father looked upon me in hopeful moments. All of these fragments converged, altering my perception of what it meant to be truly cared for. Every secret gesture, every soft murmur we exchanged, seemed to reshape my inner landscape. I began to see our connection as a delicate tapestry, woven from threads of vulnerability and quiet strength. There was a tender equilibrium in the way our lives intertwined. Her light, unwavering presence contrasted with my own shadowed recollections of loss and regret. As we drifted in our moments of shared silence, I recognized that our bond was evolving into something profound, a sanctuary from the harsh expectations of our world, and yet, paradoxically, a source of bittersweet torment. There were times when I would catch Evelyn's eyes as they gleamed with unshed tears, reflecting both empathy and an unspoken sorrow. In those moments, she seemed to silently confess her own burdens, worries of a future dictated by duty, and a destiny that left little room for personal longing. It struck me then that our connection was not just a respite from the relentless demands of the pack, but a shared haven where we both could lay down our armor. Yet, that sanctuary was delicate, precarious in its balance, for with each tender moment came the undercurrent of unavoidable duty, a reminder that even the softest of bonds may be tested by fate. One evening, while sitting in the quiet alcove of a stone chamber, we exchanged whispers barely audible above the crackle of a nearby fire. "I've learned," I murmured, "that every gentle touch and quiet smile can alter the course of a life scarred by loss." Evelyn's eyes, luminous in the firelight, softened with understanding. "And sometimes," she replied softly, "the smallest gesture means everything." Her words, though understated, resonated deep within me, stirring feelings both soothing and unsettling. It was in that moment that I realized our bond was as much a promise of renewal as it was a reminder of all we risked losing. There was tenderness in our silence, a refuge from a world that demanded strength and conformity. Yet it also whispered of the danger in opening our hearts too wide. The nights spent together in the privacy of those hidden corners of the fortress became a steady ritual. We would wander the labyrinthine corridors, sharing memories of lost dreams and fleeting hopes. I spoke hesitantly of a past where I was expected to be a leader, a warrior whose purpose was predetermined by lineage and honor. Evelyn listened, her gaze never faltering, as if absorbing every word and storing it away like a cherished secret. In her presence, the harsh judgments of the world softened, and I dared to imagine a future where the scars of my past might be healed by the gentle light of our mutual understanding. Yet even as our connection deepened, an undercurrent of tension persisted, a delicate dissonance between what we longed for and the reality that fate had imposed on us. The duty we owed to our pack loomed over our clandestine moments like a specter, a silent reminder that our hearts were not free to choose their own path without cost. Every shared smile, every secret touch carried the weight of unspoken promises, as if each was a fragile flame that could either light the way to a new beginning or be snuffed out by the inevitable pressures of destiny. Still, in that delicate balance of tenderness and looming duty, I began to see our connection as a precious exception. A secret haven where vulnerability was not weakness, but a herald of true strength. The unspoken promises between us, the silent assurance that we would stand by each other even when the world demanded otherwise, became the most powerful testament to the resilience of the human heart. Though the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, the moments of quiet intimacy with Evelyn lit a path through the encroaching darkness, a path built on soft glances, gentle touches, and a shared determination to reclaim a piece of the future that had been so cruelly robbed from us. In that hidden solace, our souls dared to believe that love, however delicate and fraught with danger, might be the very force capable of healing even the deepest wounds, a truth too compelling to ignore, even amidst the relentless march of duty and destiny. The looming engagement. It began with the hushed murmur of quiet conversations in the corridors of the fortress, a gentle prelude to a revelation that would shatter the fragile serenity I had so painstakingly built. Word had slowly, almost imperceptibly, spread among the pack that Evelyn was destined to be united, not with me, but with Leon. The news arrived not as a grand announcement, but through subtle hints, a lingering glance here, a soft sigh there, and the measured tone of voices when the subject was broached in hushed tones over shared meals or during quiet moments before dawn. I vividly remember the moment when the crushing reality of that arranged union truly struck me. I sat alone in a small, dimly lit chamber, the only sound that of my own labored breathing mingling with the faint rustle of parchment as I reread old verses that had once held my secret hope. In that solitary silence, the truth became unavoidable. Evelyn, the one whose every gentle smile and tender touch had kindled a spark within me, was to be married to Leon. The thought clashed violently with the unspoken bond we had nurtured in silence, and a cold, bitter emptiness settled deep within my chest. At first, I tried to mask the internal agony with a calm, stoic facade. Outwardly, I nodded in quiet agreement when a trusted elder mentioned the union in passing, my voice even and measured as I congratulated them in routine conversations. Yet inside, every word felt like a dagger twisting in my heart, a conflicting symphony of resignation and desperate longing. I recalled the promises made in secret, the silent assurances exchanged during our stolen glances in the corridors, and felt the cruel irony that everything I held dear was being torn from my grasp. The ceremonial preparations at the fortress only deepened the sting of loss. The grand hall was transformed into a radiant spectacle. Gilded lanterns hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm glow over intricately arranged bouquets of fresh flowers. Heavy drapes of deep crimson and gold framed the main altar, and the very air seemed to vibrate with the solemn promise of a union meant to exalt the strength and unity of our pack. Yet, despite the outward splendor, my heart ached with a profound sense of emptiness. As I moved through the busy preparations, the grandeur felt hollow, a stark reminder that while the world celebrated the future that Leon and Evelyn were to share, I was condemned to stand on the periphery, a silent witness to a destiny from which I was irrevocably excluded. In those moments of public splendor, my mind would wander to the soft, familiar touch of Evelyn's hand, a touch that, for a brief instant, had promised comfort and whispered of a future filled with shared dreams. I felt an internal storm raging within me. On one side, the desire to cling to what once might have been, a future where our hearts might have found solace together, and on the other, the aching pain of knowing that such a future was slipping away with each passing day. Every detail of the engagement ceremony, from the careful placement of each flickering candle to the meticulously arranged seating of proud elders, amplified the bittersweet contrast between what was celebrated and what was lost. Late one evening, as the final touches were being added to the ceremonial hall, I found myself alone in a secluded corridor, the noise of celebration muffled into a distant echo. I clutched a worn piece of parchment, the repository of my hidden verses and secret confessions, feeling its familiar texture against my fingertips. In that quiet solitude, I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability, the internal conflict spilling over into silent tears. I recalled every moment we had shared, every secret smile, every unspoken promise, and the image of Evelyn, radiant and true, burned before my eyes like an unreachable star. The realization was devastating. The woman who had slowly become the center of my unspoken world would soon be bound by duty to another. The weight of this revelation was overwhelming, and I felt as if I were walking a tightrope between acceptance and rebellion. I questioned whether the delicate connection we had nurtured was doomed to vanish into the cold void of arranged destiny. Could the purity of our silent promises ever overcome the merciless pressures of duty, honor, and expectation? The question haunted me with every breath, its answer as elusive as the fading echoes of a cherished song. As the day of the engagement drew nearer, tension coiled around my every thought, growing denser with each passing moment. I observed the subtle interactions between Leon and Evelyn, a shared laugh, a fleeting touch on the arm, that seemed to solidify the reality of their imminent union. Yet even in those moments, I caught fleeting traces of hesitation in her eyes, a whisper of something unspoken that hinted at a conflict deep within her own heart. Perhaps in those small fleeting moments, our bond still lingered like an unyielding ember, waiting for a chance to ignite and remind us of what might have been. Standing on the precipice of this new and painful chapter, I felt the crushing duality of my existence. The facade of calm, respectful acceptance that I presented to the world belied an inner turmoil that gnawed at me relentlessly. Each ceremonial detail, every whispered word of congratulation, and every final arrangement served as a stark testament to the love that would soon be forever out of reach. And so, with the echoing sounds of the fortress's preparations swirling, around me I stood alone with my thoughts, a silent observer to a destiny both grand and heartbreakingly unattainable. The looming engagement was a bitter promise of what must come, an inevitable truth that cast a long, sorrowful shadow over all that I held dear. As the day neared, I could only wonder, how would the unfolding of this love triangle reshape our lives? What price would be demanded of a heart so full of unspoken devotion? The answers, I knew, would be revealed in time. But for now, the pain of lost possibilities and the looming specter of the future left me suspended in a state of profound, agonizing uncertainty. Desperate reflections in the woods. That night, I fled the suffocating weight of the fortress, its walls echoing with the painful truths of a shattered future. I sought refuge in the dense woods beyond, where nature's raw embrace could at least mirror the chaos within my broken spirit. Every step I took along the narrow, winding path felt both deliberate and heavy, each footfall resonating with echoes of regret, sorrow, and a stubborn spark of determination that refused to die. The forest greeted me with an ethereal stillness, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The moon hung low, silver and serene, casting elongated shadows through the canopy and painting the forest floor with patches of light and darkness. It was in this liminal space between night and dawn that I wandered, lost in thought and burdened by memories too painful to speak aloud. As I walked, my mind churned with a tumult of doubts and desperate longings. I could almost hear the whisper of every regret, with each rustle of leaves beneath my tired feet. What have I become? I asked myself silently, the question slicing through the quiet like a shard of broken glass. I recalled a time when I had dreams of glory and leadership, a future where I would stand tall as the alpha of our pack. But now, in the dim light of the forest, all that ambition seemed as distant as the stars hidden behind a blanket of clouds. Every step on that rugged path brought back memories of both past accolades and current failures. I remembered the fierce expectations that once drove me, the warm pride of my parents, and the unwavering support that now felt like a cruel, ironic echo. The bitter irony was that the very strengths I was meant to possess, bravery, resilience, and might, had been eroded by tragedy, leaving behind a fragile semblance of a man whose heart beat with lost potential. I could feel it in the uneven rhythm of my steps, in the way the cool, damp earth seemed to absorb my sorrows. The natural world around me was not indifferent to my pain. As I traversed a narrow trail bordered by ferns and ancient oaks, the forest whispered its own melancholic song. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the soft murmur of a hidden stream all blended into a symphony that mirrored the tumult inside me. Each element of nature, each gnarled branch and each soft patch of moss, seemed to hold a fragment of the despair and longing within my soul, as if the forest itself bore witness to the internal battle raging in me. In that quiet solitude, I allowed my thoughts to roam freely, unburdening the secrets I had kept hidden for too long. I questioned the very essence of my self-worth. Am I nothing more than the sum of my failures? I wondered aloud to the silent trees, hoping for an answer that might bring solace. The branches of an old oak, twisted and worn by time, seemed to lean in, as if to listen, their rough bark a stark contrast to the delicate vulnerability of my thoughts. I remembered the unspoken promises of my youth, the dreams that once ignited my heart with the vision of a future forged in strength and honor, now nothing more than scattered embers in the cold night. My inner dialogue was raw, filled with a tortured blend of secret desire and painful doubt. I longed for a chance to reclaim the person I once envisioned, to feel the power of my destiny unfold instead of succumbing to a fate marred by loss and compromise. Yet the weight of my past failures pressed down with each measured breath. There was an ache, a constant, unrelenting ache, for a love and acceptance that had been so cruelly withheld. I questioned whether the hardened exterior I now wore was merely a mask, a futile attempt to shield a heart that still beat with tender hope. As I trod deeper into the wilderness, I reached a small clearing, bathed in the soft luminescence of moonlight. The space felt sacred, as though it were meant for reckoning. I paused, letting the cool night air fill my lungs, and gazed upward at the interplay of light and shadow across the star-studded sky. In that silent moment, an overwhelming clarity descended upon me. A pivotal realization that to move forward, I must confront not only the cruelty of my present but also the lingering echoes of who I once aspired to be. Here, in the quiet embrace of nature, a decision began to form. I realized that clinging to the past only deepened the wounds, and that perhaps the only way to mend my shattered self was to face the inner torment directly. I thought of all the lost opportunities and the deafening silence of dreams deferred, and with a deep, shuddering exhale, I accepted that change was inevitable. The woods, dark and mysterious, had become a mirror reflecting my internal chaos, and in that reflection, I saw a path, a painful, uncertain path, towards self-redemption. Inside. The echo of that realization I vowed with a quiet fierceness that I would no longer let fear dictate my destiny. I would muster the courage to embrace the vulnerability within, to allow the fierce longing and the raw, unhealed scars to guide me toward a future where I could reclaim my worth, not through force, but through the gentle power of acceptance and the unspoken promise of self-love. Standing there in that moonlit clearing, the woods around me pulsated with life and with the silent promise of renewal. My heart, battered by the cruelty of fate, beat steadily, as if affirming that even in the darkest of nights, there remains a stubborn ember of hope, one that, once nurtured, might ignite a new chapter defined not by despair, but by resilience and the quiet, enduring strength of a spirit reborn. The confrontation at the doorstep. The air outside Evelyn's door was thick with unspoken tension, a charged silence that made every heartbeat resound like a drum in my ears. Standing at the threshold of her room, I could see the dim light spilling through the narrow gap, casting delicate shadows over the intricate details of her gown. It was half-zipped, a subtle imperfection that spoke of haste and turmoil, a small, silent rebellion against the expectations that pressed in on us both. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the cool doorknob as my chest tightened with a mixture of longing and dread. Through that narrow opening, I caught glimpses of Evelyn. Her beauty, as fragile as it was defiant, illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns. Her silhouette was outlined by the gentle flicker of light, every contour, revealing vulnerability mingled with an inner strength that had always captivated me. My heart pounded as I observed the subtle, yet complex language of her body, a delicate tilt of her head, the way her eyes shimmered with an unreadable mix of hope and sorrow, and her hand, trembling slightly as it reached to adjust the fabric of her gown. The sight of her, so conflicted and resolute at the same time, struck me with a profound urgency. Here was the woman I had loved in secret, whose every silent glance and gentle touch had promised a future we might never share. And yet, at that very moment, the weight of duty pressed down on me like an iron shackle. The arranged union with Leon loomed like an inescapable fate, a reality I had long tried to ignore. My internal battle raged silently. Should I honor the expectations that had been laid out for me, or dare to risk everything for a stolen moment of true connection? With a trembling exhale, I gathered my resolve and gently knocked on the door. The sound was barely audible, swallowed by the thick, heavy silence that blanketed the corridor. Almost immediately, the door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of Evelyn's face. Her eyes, wide and searching in that brief instant, met mine with a mixture of hope, sorrow, and a fierce, defiant fire that set my heart ablaze. For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath as our gazes locked, a silent exchange laden with promises, unspoken regrets, and the raw pain of impending loss. Chris. Her voice, husky with emotion, broke the stillness, carrying with it a tremor of uncertainty that cut deep. I could see her hand trembling slightly at her side, as if trying to steady herself against forces both external and internal. Every detail, the slight quiver of her lower lip, the way her eyes flickered downward as if to hide what they could not bear to reveal, spoke volumes of the inner turmoil that had taken root within her. She was caught at the crossroads of love and obligation, her beauty marred by the relentless march of destiny. In that charged moment at her doorstep, I felt the full force of my own conflicted heart. The organized structure of our lives within, the fortress, the cold, calculated arrangement of the engagement, contrasted so starkly with the raw, unguarded emotion that surged between us. I knew that every second counted. The clarity of that moment was a double-edged sword, offering both the possibility of a forbidden union and the inevitability of a duty that could never be denied. The pain of watching Evelyn drift towards a future with Leon, a future planned by hands I could not control, felt like a dagger twisting slowly in my chest. I took a tentative step forward, driven by the desperate need to bridge the distance that fate had imposed upon us. "Eve," I whispered, my voice barely rising above the murmur of the night. My words faltered as the sound of approaching footsteps and hushed voices reminded me of the world beyond this intimate crisis. The certainty of duty, the weight of our shared past, and the looming certainty of the engagement, all converged into one crushing moment of decision. For one agonizing heartbeat, I stood frozen, torn between the fierce yearning to cry out my truth and the desperate need to retreat into the safety of what I believed must be expected of me. The fragments of our previous glances, soft touches, and whispered promises danced before my eyes, urging me to defy destiny. Yet the reality of an arranged union, backed by the unyielding traditions of our pack, pressed upon me like a storm gathering on the horizon. Evelyn's eyes searched mine, pleading silently for a choice that would alter the course of our lives. The moment stretched into an eternity, each second etched with the weight of all the lost possibilities and the uncertain promise of what might still be salvaged. Outside her door, in the dim glow of the lantern, our futures balanced perilously on the edge of a decision that could either shatter us further or light a path through the coming darkness. In that fraught instant, I knew that my next action would irrevocably change everything. With trembling resolve, I drew in a deep breath, preparing to speak the words that had long been caged within my heart. Would I dare to cast aside the safety of duty and embrace the illicit, agonizing beauty of a love that defied every expectation? Or would I surrender to the inexorable pull of destiny, allowing the arranged union to seal our fates apart? The quiet rustle of Evelyn's gown, the soft murmur of her voice, and the almost tangible intensity of our silent exchange set the stage for a crisis that promised to alter our lives forever. As I stepped closer, the light from the doorway caught. The glistening tears in her eyes and the weight of unsaid words pressed me onward into a future fraught with uncertainty. And as the world held its breath, I stood at the threshold of choice. A precarious balance between a love that dared not speak its full name and the cold, implacable certainty of duty. What path would I choose, and how would it unravel the delicate threads of our shared destiny? The answer, suspended in that agonizing moment, would soon change everything. The ceremony and public judgment. The day of the engagement ceremony dawned with a deceptive air of celebration, a grand spectacle that masked the deep internal agony festering within me. As I stood at the periphery of the gathering, the fortress transformed into a stage of light and shadow. Golden lanterns, draped artfully along the ancient stone walls, bathed the courtyards in a warm, flickering glow that should have been joyous, yet each light only served to remind me of the unforgiving reality of our fate. Every detail of the setting was crafted to evoke a sense of grandeur and unity. Ornate decorations, rich fabrics in deep crimson and gold, and meticulously arranged bouquets of fragrant flowers lent an air of regal solemnity to the event. Murmuring crowds of our pack, respected elders, proud warriors, and anxious family members, all gathered with expressions of guarded anticipation, their whispers weaving through the halls like a tapestry of judgment. The air, heavy with incense, and the soft rustling of fine garments, bore the weight of tradition and the inexorable pull of destiny. I found myself a silent observer, compelled to hide behind a mask of forced calm. My eyes, though fixed on the unfolding scene, betrayed the tumult raging inside me. Every forced smile, every polite nod as I exchanged brief greetings with others, was a stark contradiction to the intense heartache I felt. In the crowded grandeur of the hall, I was painfully aware of my isolation. The vibrant energy around me only accentuated the void that had taken root in my soul. I had once been promised a future of leadership and honor, but now I was condemned to watch as the love of my life was bound to another, a reality as cruel as it was final. Then, the moment I had dreaded and secretly longed for arrived like a thunderclap amid the soft murmur of the assembled pack. In the center of the grand ceremonial hall, under an arch of intricately carved stone bathed in amber light, Leon approached Evelyn. Every eye in the room seemed to fix on the pair, the heavy expectation palpable as if the very air quivered with the anticipation of fate's final decree. For a moment, time slowed. The hushed silence was broken only by the distant sound of a solitary drum and the soft exhalations of anxious breath. Leon's expression was a complex mix of triumph and an unspoken cruelty, his eyes dark and determined as he held out a ring. The ring glinted like a shard of captured sunlight, a symbol of victory, of a destiny that he had claimed without contest. With deliberate grace, he guided the ring to Evelyn's delicate finger. The instant the ring encircled her finger, a wave of disbelief and sorrow surged through me. It was as though every heartbeat, every whispered hope I had nurtured in secret, exploded into a cacophony of unbearable defeat. Evelyn's eyes, which for so long had shone with a mixture of warmth and hidden longing when they met mine, now reflected a tumult of conflicting emotions. In that charged moment, as the ring clicked into place, the beauty of the ceremony was punctuated by the raw bitterness of loss. Around us, the murmuring crowd erupted into a cascade of whispers and half-spoken judgments. Conversations in hushed tones filled the space, a symphony of opinions and speculations that seemed to judge not only Evelyn and Leon, but also the fate of our entire pack. The proud, watchful eyes of the elders bore into us, their unyielding gazes a reminder that in our world, every personal choice was scrutinized, every defiance of tradition met with a public censure. I stood there, a silent witness cloaked in sorrow, as the smiles of the celebrants gradually faded into a gaunt, hollow mask. Each congratulatory gesture, every carefully measured compliment, felt like a dagger in my heart. Despite the outward ceremony, I felt acutely that this union was not a true celebration of love, but rather an imposed destiny, a victory that belonged to someone else. Leon's confident stance, his assured demeanor while he looked around at the assembled crowd, only deepened the sharp contrast with the agony of my own internal defeat. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation, and every detail, the soft rustle of silk, the gentle flicker of candlelight, the eloquent murmur of age-old chants, seemed designed to sanctify the arranged union. Yet for me, it only brought forth the painful realization of my irrevocable loss. I questioned everything, the fairness of fate, the rigidity of tradition, and most of all, whether the deep, silent bond I had nurtured with Evelyn could ever withstand the force of public judgment and the relentless demands of destiny. In that crucible of emotion, I felt my resolve waver. There was a part of me that had long imagined a different future, one where love triumphed over duty, where a whispered secret shared between two souls had the power to defy the established order. Now, with the ring glistening on Evelyn's finger and the jubilant applause of the pack serving as an unwelcome chorus of finality, that imagined future crumbled before my eyes. As the ceremony proceeded, I struggled to compose myself, wrestling with the bitter taste of defeat that clung to me like a second skin. With every passing minute, the public spectacle intensified, and so too did the internal storm of regret and longing. I could no longer distinguish between the facade of celebration and the raw, aching reality of what was being lost. The weight of public judgment, the chorus of whispered opinions, and the grand pageantry of the event combined to leave me standing at the edge of despair, a silent bystander to the union that sealed our fates. As the final moments of the ceremony drew to a close, my heart pounded with an urgency I could not ignore. The sight of Evelyn, radiant yet haunted by some inner turmoil, left me questioning not only what the future would hold for her, but also for me. Would this public judgment, this enforced destiny, be the end of everything I had once dared to believe in? Or was it merely the beginning of a deeper struggle, one that could perhaps redefine the boundaries of love and loyalty within our world? Standing amid the resounding applause and fervent whispers, I faced an uncertain cliffhanger, a poignant, agonizing moment that demanded a choice. The engagement had been sealed by ceremony, yet the silent dialogue of my heart remained unfulfilled. And as I gazed at Evelyn, my mind swirled with unspoken questions and desperate hope, wondering if somehow, against all odds, our secret connection might yet find a way to break free of the bonds of tradition, violence, betrayal, and the breaking point. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted into a brutal confrontation, an explosion of hidden truths and raw, unbridled anger that shattered all remnants of fragile illusions. It began with a whispered question, barely audible over the pounding of hearts. The truth about the poems. In that fateful moment, accusations transformed into weapons, and the delicate secrets I had kept for so long were dragged violently into the harsh light of reality. The gathering in the communal hall of the fortress turned into a vortex of chaos. As murmurs swelled into cries, Leon's eyes blazed with a fury that seemed almost otherworldly. With a voice that dripped with venom, he demanded to know, Did you really write those poems, Christopher? Were they all yours? The question sliced through the charged air like a sharpened knife, laying bare the betrayal that had festered beneath the surface of our interactions. Every eye in the hall widened, and for a split second, time seemed to slow as the weight of that inquiry settled over us all. The revelation of my secret verses was more than a personal confession. It was the catalyst that ignited a bitter struggle for power, loyalty, and love. My words, meant to be expressions of a hidden passion for Evelyn, had become evidence of deceit in Leon's eyes. His features contorted into a grimace of betrayal, and with a single explosive motion, he launched himself at me. The air filled with the sound of clashing voices and the grunts of exertion as the conflict escalated. Fists flew, and the hall resounded with the thud of blows and the sickening crack of bone meeting relentless force. I staggered back, the searing pain in my body a brutal reminder that my vulnerabilities were now laid bare for all to see. Each impact felt like an echo of the emotional scars that had marred my soul over the years. A final, shattering blow to the remnants of the man I used to be. Amid the chaos, I could sense conflicting loyalties tearing through the pack. Some members whose eyes flickered with doubt, others who seemed to relish the spectacle of our strife, while a few stood rooted in sorrow, their faces etched with regret. Every strike carried not only physical agony, but the weight of a deeper betrayal. I had bared my soul in the form of ink on paper, weaving verses of longing and hidden desire meant only for the silent communion of nature and night. Instead, those very verses had transformed into a weapon that pierced through the trust that once tethered us together. In the midst of the violent melee, Evelyn's eyes widened in horror, her face a canvas of pure anguish as she witnessed the collapse of everything I had held dear. The room spun, punctuated by every blow and grimace, until it felt as though the whole world was rattling with the sound of our broken dreams. Leon's relentless barrage of attacks was punctuated by moments where his voice, raw with hurt and fury, lashed out with bitter clarity. "You betrayed me, Christopher. You tricked me with your words, with your lies." His shout reverberated off the stone walls, a declaration of war that left no doubt about the depth of his wounded pride. Each insult, each accusation was not simply a verbal attack, but a declaration of the fractures now visible in the relationships that had once bound our pack together. The air was thick with conflicting loyalties. Anger and grief mingled, creating an almost tangible barrier between past alliances and the new, dangerous reality. In that moment of violent confrontation, I felt my heart shatter in a way that was both physical and emotional. My vulnerability was laid bare. Every secret and every unspoken promise suddenly turned against me. I struggled to defend not only my body, but the very essence of who I was. A person who had always tried, in his own fragile way, to speak the language of truth through his poetry. But in the heat of battle, words meant to heal had turned into thorns, pricking both my pride and my soul. The skirmish grew so fierce that the harsh sounds of the confrontation drowned out all other voices. I attempted to block the onslaught, my arms weakly rising in a feeble defense, but the force behind Leon's strikes was like a tempest, unyielding and devastating. In a final, desperate act of resistance, I gathered my remaining strength and clashed back, desperate to protect the sliver of truth that remained within me. Yet, as the blows continued, it became evident that this was not merely a fight for supremacy. It was a battle for the very soul of our intertwined destinies. Mid the swirling dust and the echoing sounds of agony and fury, Leon's eyes suddenly hardened into a steely glare. With an enraged declaration that reverberated through the hall, he spat. "If you ever dare to defy me again, if you ever contradict the words I've claimed as truth, you will pay dearly." His words were a final, furious ultimatum, an explosion of wrath that cut as sharply as any physical blow. In that tumultuous moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, every eye glued to the scene as the fragility of our bonds was laid bare. I stood there, battered and bloodied, feeling the crushing weight of betrayal and guilt mingled with a spark of defiance. The confrontation had shattered any pretense of innocence remaining in our shared past and left behind a chasm of raw emotion and shattered trust. As Leon's furious gaze bore into mine, and the crowd murmured in a mix of shock and approval, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The breaking point had been reached, and the future of our bonds, and possibly the fate of our pack, now hung in the balance, poised on the edge of an uncertain, perilous new reality. Aftermath, heartbreak, and isolation. In the suffocating hush that followed the violent maelstrom, a heavy silence settled over the hall. The echoes of clashing blows and anguished cries faded into a haunting stillness, a silence so profound it seemed to swallow every unspoken word and every fleeting glance that had once carried promise. I stood amidst the wreckage of shattered ideals and broken bonds, my body aching with physical pain, while my soul writhed under the crushing weight of betrayal. As the immediate chaos subsided, the murmurs of the pack receded into a dull background hum. I found myself isolated at the edge of the gathering, shrouded in a loneliness that no amount of public spectacle could assuage. Every step I took felt measured and burdensome, as though I were trudging through molasses, a painful reminder that the storm of violence had left more than bruises on my skin. It had scarred my very essence. In the stillness that followed, my thoughts turned inward with a relentless intensity. I recalled every bittersweet moment that had led to this aching heartbreak. I remembered the gentle whispers exchanged with Evelyn in the quiet corridors of the fortress, the secret smiles, tender touches, and shared glances that had once ignited a flame of hope within me. Those precious moments now felt like fleeting shadows of a past that had been brutally usurped by an arranged destiny. With each memory, the reality of my isolation deepened, underscoring the cruel irony that even the love I had nurtured in silence remained unreturned. I retreated into an internal monologue, questioning the choices I had made and the trust I had placed in a world that now seemed cold and unforgiving. The verses I had poured my soul into, the secret, intimate poems written beneath the ancient oak, raced through my mind, as if accusing me of my vulnerabilities. They were once my sanctuary, the language with which I expressed my deepest desires and relentless sorrow. But now, they served as a painful reminder of a truth I could no longer escape. The love that had bloomed quietly within me was something I had to bear alone. Betrayal, bitter and searing, lingered like a malignant presence in every corner of my being. I recalled Leon's enraged declaration and the way his fists had pounded into me, a physical manifestation of the emotional betrayal that had cut so deeply. His voice, heavy with fury, had declared my weakness and accused me of deceit. The intensity of that moment had shattered any remaining illusion of innocence, leaving me with the raw, unfiltered awareness that my heart, fragile and battered, had never truly found solace in the arms of another. As I stood there in that painful quiet, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. The public judgment of the pack, once a distant concern in a world of honor and duty, now intruded relentlessly into the intimate space of my grief. I was left to grapple with the realization that my secret love, my hidden poems, and the tender feelings I had harbored in every silent moment would never be reciprocated in the way I so desperately desired. The dichotomy between the fiercely emotional connection I once believed in and the stark, unyielding reality of an arranged union left me numb, a broken man whose hopes had been eclipsed by duty and betrayal. In that solitude, my inner voice grew louder, a mix of self-doubt and bitter resolve. I questioned whether I was ever worthy of the love that had once seemed so vibrant, and whether these scars, both visible and unseen, would forever isolate me from the light of genuine connection. Each memory of Evelyn's soft smile and every shared secret now morphed into an echo of what might have been, a poignant reminder of the possibilities that had been snatched away in a single, devastating moment of confrontation. The emotional, Fallout was not something that could be easily tamed. It churned within me like a storm, propelling me into a state of dangerous introspection. The lingering impact of the betrayal, the chasm between my aspirations and my harsh reality, and the relentless ache of unreturned love coalesced into a torrent of raw emotion that threatened to sweep me away. In the midst of this internal chaos, I felt the oppressive grip of self-doubt tighten around me, an ever-present fear that I was too broken to be whole again, too tainted by failure to ever reclaim what I had once dreamed of. Yet, even amid the despair and isolation, there flickered a small, stubborn ember, a spark of determination that, though buried beneath layers of pain, quietly urged me to keep moving forward. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and every step taken was fraught with the risk of further heartbreak. But the brutal honesty of my suffering had also awakened something within me, a realization that in order to survive, I must face my inner torment and transform it into something that might one day heal the scars. As the crowd dispersed and the murmurs faded into a mournful silence, I was left alone with my thoughts, a solitary figure in the aftermath of a shattered dream. The echoes of public judgment and the bitterness of betrayal had left deep fractures in my heart, isolating me from a future that now seemed insurmountable. And yet, in that very isolation, there was a promise, a hint of unresolved desire, and a dangerous yet liberating self-awareness that would propel me forward. In the quiet of that aftermath, with heartbreak weighing heavily on every breath I took, I resolved that I would not allow these painful experiences to remain my final reality. I would confront the darkness within, even if it meant walking a lonely, uncertain path. For amidst the ruins of shattered love and broken promises, there was, perhaps, the faintest glimmer of hope, a promise that even the deepest isolation could someday give way to a renewal of spirit, if I had the courage to reclaim my own worth. Whispers in the moonlight. When the night had finally released its turbulent grip on my heart, I found myself once again drawn to the familiar sanctuary of the woods. Under the expansive, starlit sky, I wandered back to the old oak tree that
had witnessed countless secrets of my soul, its mighty origin, felt a call to return and rediscover the catharsis of my hidden bird is now within.
The gentle glow of the moon. The oak tree stood like an ancient sentinel, its bark rough and comforting to my weathered hands. In the soft luminescence of the moonlight, every twist and crack in its trunk evoked memories of nights spent pouring my deepest truths onto fragile parchment. I settled beneath its sprawling canopy, the cool earth grounding me as I unfurled the rolled piece of paper that had long remained my silent confidant. The cool night air, filled with the scent of dew and earth, wrapped around me like a familiar cloak, a gentle reminder that even amidst inner turmoil, nature holds a timeless solace. As I began to write, the world around me seemed to fall into a harmonious rhythm with the beating of my heart. The rustle of leaves in a tender breeze and the distant call of a night bird fused with the scratch of my pen on paper, creating a quiet symphony of renewal. I wrote like a man possessed by both pain and hope, each word a confession, a whispered secret of love and loss, a declaration of rebellion against a destiny that had so long stifled my voice. My lines spilled forth, laden with metaphors of falling leaves and rippling water, as if nature itself were reflecting the tumult within. The verses were born of suffering, but carried a defiant spark, a gentle promise to myself that my truth, however raw, remained entirely my own. Each stroke of ink was an act of liberation, a way to exorcise the ghosts of my past and transform regret into possibility. I recalled the long nights of solitude when my heart, battered and bruised, found refuge in poetry. I remembered the times I had dared to hope, even when the world around me seemed determined to rob me of every fragment of light. In that quiet moment under the silver radiance of the moon, every desperate desire, every ounce of heartbreak and longing was given form. The poem that emerged was at once a confession and a rebellion, etching out a small, undying promise of redemption, despite the void that had once swallowed me whole. The natural world was my silent witness to these covert revelations. The cool, gentle breeze whispered through the oak's leaves, each rustle echoing like a soft, reassuring murmur against the relentless winds of fate. The moon, a luminous guardian in the vast darkness, cast a glow that transformed the night into a canvas of shifting shadows and silver brilliance. It was as if the entire forest, from the smallest blade of grass to the rugged trail beneath my feet, vibrated with the pulse of ancient secrets and the promise of renewal. I let my thoughts flow freely onto the parchment, each word a testament to the undying hope that, however fragile, still burned within me. In my verses, I wove images of dawn breaking after a long, unyielding night, and of the gentle persistence of a stream carving its path through solid rock. My words became a dialogue with the universe, a soft, poetic rebellion against the constraints of a painful past and a resigned present. They were a declaration that I would continue to be the keeper of my own truth, that even in the face of despair, there was beauty to be found in the act of creation. With each passing line, a bittersweet serenity began to settle over me. Though the memories of shattered promises and unreturned love still lurked in the quiet corners of my mind, I also felt the stirring of something new, a possibility of change, tentative yet undeniable. As the rhythm of my heart synchronized with the cadence of my writing, I experienced a profound transformation. This was not merely a moment of catharsis. It was a promise, a vow to keep fighting for the renewal of my spirit, no matter how arduous the path might be. By the time the ink had dried on my latest verses, the night had deepened, its shadows growing richer and its silence more profound. I carefully rolled the parchment once more and pressed it into the crevice of the oak tree, a secret offering to the eternal witness that had seen all of my beginnings and my many endings. In that act of leaving behind my words, my heart laid, bare in written form, I felt both the sting of loneliness and the gentle lift of hope. I knew that these secret verses, though hidden from the eyes of the world, were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a promise that even the darkest nights eventually give way to new beginnings. Under the watchful eye of the moon, as the forest whispered its age-old lullaby, I rose with a quiet determination in my heart. The journey of healing was far from over, and though the scars of my past would remain, I now carried with me a small, luminous ember of hope, a promise that tomorrow might yet bring a gentle dawn. And in that solitary, sacred moment beneath the old oak, I vowed to nurture that light, to let it guide me through the uncertainties of life, and to reclaim the narrative of my existence, one heartfelt verse at a time. The weight of unspoken truths. In the quiet solitude of the night, my mind became a battlefield where two identities, one born of secret, delicate verses, and the other a persona forced upon me by fate, clashed in bitter, endless conflict. I often found myself wondering who I truly was beneath the heavy armor of expectations, and every moment of silent introspection only deepened the chasm between the real me, the poet with unspoken passion, and the dutiful figure I was meant to be. I recall the days when I hid behind words, pouring endless verses into the darkness under the old oak tree. Those secret lines were my sanctuary, a space where I could be vulnerable and authentic, free to express the deep, aching desire I harbored for Evelyn without fear or restraint. Yet, outside that private haven, fate had draped me in a persona I never chose, a figure molded by legacy and duty, expected to uphold honor without the messy, unpredictable truths of a tender heart. The discrepancy between my hidden self and the mask I wore in the light of day became an ever-growing burden, as if every heartbeat echoed with the cost of suppressing who I truly longed to be. As I navigated the corridors of my daily life, I could feel the tension building, a constant reminder that my secret self was waging a silent war against the expectation imposed upon me. I observed the world around me, noting how those I cared for often prioritized security over passion, opting for stable, predictable lives that left little room for the fierce vulnerability of honest expression. I envied them their unburdened smiles and fearless commitments. I craved a life where I could openly share my love, my poetry, without the weight of inevitable loss pressing upon my soul. There were moments, too, when I almost dared to reveal the true measure of my inner world. In the silent exchange of glances with Evelyn, in the way our eyes locked for a heartbeat longer than necessary, I felt the pull of unsaid words, a magnetic pull towards honesty. Yet each time I sensed that fragile moment of connection, fear gripped me. I was terrified that revealing the luminous truth of my poetry would shatter the delicate bond we had carefully cultivated. What if she, too, chose the security of a preconceived destiny over the wild, raw passion I tried so desperately to express? What if my words, born of the deepest parts of my soul, were met with the same cold indifference that had haunted me for years? The internal struggle was relentless. Every day I performed my role, offering a smile and a nod as if the burden of my silent anguish could vanish with a simple gesture. But inside, I was a storm of conflicting emotions, a ceaseless oscillation between longing for complete freedom to love openly and the paralyzing fear of irrevocable loss. I spent countless hours tossing and turning, wrestling with the idea that the cost of honest expression might be too steep a price to pay. My heart ached with the memory of whispered promises made under moonlit skies, promises that now seemed doomed to wither away under the harsh light of reality. I began to question the very nature of love itself. Is it better to hold your truth close, cocooned in secrecy, or to risk everything by laying your soul bare before the world? The more I delved into these thoughts, the more I realized that my poetry was not just an art. It was a lifeline. It was the pure, unedited language of my heart, the vessel carrying every hope, every regret, every tender secret that I dared not speak out loud. And yet, every time I hesitated before revealing my verses to the light of day, a part of me felt as if I were surrendering not just my words, but the essence of who I was. In the stillness of many long nights, I would reread my private pages, each line resonating with the quiet echo of my past. I questioned, am I betraying myself by keeping these words hidden? How much longer can I live a life split between who I am and who fate demands I be? The silence of my secret poems was a constant companion, a reminder that the truth within me remained locked away, a treasure too precious and painful to share openly for fear of destroying the fragile remnants of my heart. The tension reached its apex when I began to see that the dichotomy of my existence was tearing me apart from the inside. I yearned for the day when I could finally cast off the chains of imposed destiny, to let my words flow freely and claim the love I had long fought for. Deep down, I knew that to reveal my true self was to face the possibility of rejection, to risk the loss of everything I held dear. But the thought of continuing to live in silence, the idea of being forever trapped behind a facade, filled me with an unbearable sorrow. As the seasons changed, so too did the tone of my internal monologue. What once was a desperate struggle became, bit by bit, a burgeoning resolve. I began to wonder if perhaps the time had come to embrace the duality of my nature, to honor both the covert poet and the man forged by duty. Could I, with all its fear and vulnerability, set my secret truths free, even if only to claim the love that had defined every unspoken moment between Evelyn and me? The question lingered, heavy in my thoughts, a tantalizing promise of self-redemption that whispered of a future where I might finally be whole. The cost of silence, I realized, was not merely a personal loss. It was a theft of the beauty that could have been, a negation of every heartfelt verse that had ever pulsed with life. The weight of unspoken truths was a burden I could no longer bear indefinitely. And so, in the quiet depth of the night, as the world around me slumbered under a blanket of stars, I made a silent vow. I would find the courage to reclaim my identity, as the poet I was always meant to be, to let my truth shine forth like a beacon, no matter the price. In that fragile resolve lay both hope and the fear of what might be lost. But it was a risk I knew I could no longer avoid. A new dawn, a final choice. At last, the final gathering arrived, a moment when destiny and desire collided in a storm of raw emotion and unyielding determination. The grand hall of the fortress, illuminated by the soft gleam of morning light and laden with echoes of the night's tumult, served as the stage for what would be my defining moment. Every eye in the room was fixed on the unfolding scene, and the murmuring crowd, heavy with public verdicts and buried hopes, heightened the intensity of the choice that now lay before me. In that decisive instant, I stood at the nexus of acceptance and defiance. The remnants of my shattered dreams, those whispered promises and secret verses, clung to me like fading echoes of a time when I believed in my own worth. Yet, there was a burning insistence deep within, a pull from the depths, of a love so profound it defied the crushing weight of defeat. The internal battle that had raged for countless nights now surged to the forefront, compelling me to confront the harsh verdict of our pack and the quiet devastation of unreturned love. The hall buzzed with anticipation. Every detail around me, glittering chandeliers, intricate tapestries celebrating age-old valor, and the pristine decor that masked old scars, resonated with the gravity of the moment. I could feel the pulse of the assembled crowd, their collective judgment, an almost tangible force that pressed down upon my shoulders. It was in this charged environment that I realized that to remain silent, to let the imposed fate of the arranged union pass unchallenged, was to surrender not just my dreams, but the very essence of who I was. The heart within me, scarred and resilient, yearned to fight for a love that was as wild and unrefined as it was irrevocable. My thoughts swirled like a tempest. Memories of secret midnight meetings with Evelyn, tender moments where her gaze communicated, more than words ever could, and the aching pain of every unspoken line of poetry I had crafted in solitude, all converged into a singular, agonizing question. Would I resign myself to being a broken echo of the alpha I was meant to be? Or would I dare to rise, embrace my truth, and claim the love that had defined every heartbeat of my existence? A hush fell over the hall as the ceremony reached its climax. The head elder, his voice steady with the weight of tradition, pronounced the final verdict, a declaration that sealed the fate of our union. His words, though courteous and steeped in centuries of practice, struck me like icy arrows. In that moment, it seemed that every expectation, every imposed duty, and every sacrifice demanded by our sacred customs converged into one devastating decree. The public spectacle, once an embodiment of unity and order, now felt like an oppressive cage, confining not only Evelyn's destiny, but my own. The pressure built relentlessly, and as the final words of the elder's speech reverberated through the marble chamber, my internal resolve solidified. I could feel the relentless pull of love, a force that whispered of what might be, of a future that could be reclaimed if only I would have the courage to defy fate. The truth of my existence, the secret poet buried beneath years of enforced stoicism and silent suffering, clamored to break free. I knew that the path ahead was fraught with peril, that the cost of honesty might be the deepest pain I had ever endured. Yet, to walk away now would be to relinquish every fragment of hope that still flickered within me. In that volatile moment, as eyes turned to me and the hushed whispers of onlookers grew into an almost deafening chorus, I stepped forward. My voice, which had long been a casualty of broken promises, emerged steady, yet trembling with raw emotion. "I cannot accept this fate," I declared, the words slicing through the charged atmosphere, eliciting shocked silence and sudden intense stares from those assembled. "I choose my truth, my heart, my soul, and I will fight for what I believe in, even if it means defying tradition and risking everything." A gasp rippled through the crowd, and for a heartbeat, even the relentless ticking of time seemed to pause. My declaration, raw and unguarded, exposed the deepest fissures in the carefully constructed facade of duty. I saw in the eyes of some a glimmer of uncertain hope, while others looked upon me with cold disdain, as if my defiance were a stain on the legacy they so fervently upheld. At that precipice of decision, my mind raced with one final desperate question. Could I reclaim the identity that had once burned so fiercely within me? Or was I doomed to remain forever the broken wolf in the shadows, haunted by the very love I wished to embrace? The uncertainty loomed, a powerful, lingering question that would forever mark the next chapter of our intertwined destinies. The hall, once a tableau of ceremonial splendor, now pulsed with the raw energy of rebellion and heartbreak. The path before me was uncertain, its outcome a tapestry yet to be woven by fate and by my own daring choices. As I took that irrevocable step toward challenging the order of things, I knew that the war between fate and free will was far from over. And in the depths of that moment, under the unwavering gaze of every soul in that storied hall, I dared to hope that my truth, however fraught with peril, might someday light a path out of the darkness